The sacrifice of the Mass, particularly the celebration of the Eucharist, is considered to be the most important activity that the Church does, even above charitable works or acts of mercy. As the Second Vatican Council says, the liturgy is the summit toward which the activity of the Church is directed. This is because the love of God is always more important than the love of neighbor or of charitable deeds. When Jesus was challenged about this priority by the traitor apostle Judas in the 12th chapter of the Gospel of John, Jesus responded saying, "You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." And again, in the iconic story of Martha and Mary, wherein Martha was concerned with external good works, but Mary with adoration of Jesus, Jesus responded, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her." Because Jesus' body and blood is the apex of the Christian sacramental life, every soul must present themselves worthily to receive this sacrament. Although we are all sinners, particularly grave sins, such as missing Mass, require us to make right with God through the ministry of confession before we participate in this great act of His love. This importance is alluded to in the parable of the wedding feast, where Jesus represents the Mass as a wedding put on by God, saying, "When the king came in to meet the guests, he saw a man there not dressed in a wedding garment. He said to him, 'My friend, how is it that you came in here without a wedding garment?' But he was reduced to silence. Then the king said to his attendants, 'Bind his hands and feet, and cast him into the darkness outside, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth.'" This dramatic account illustrates a point that is made more explicit by St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians when he says, "Therefore, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord unworthily will have to answer for the body and blood of the Lord. Anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment on himself." In other words, rather than being the great gift to the soul that the Eucharist is intended to be, it will instead damage the soul for those who are not yet ready to receive it. Thus the Catechism writes, anyone conscious of a grave sin must receive the sacrament of reconciliation before coming to communion. And the Council of Trent notes, sacramental confession is, of necessity, to be made beforehand by those whose conscience is burdened with mortal sin. Furthermore, the willful violation of this precept to confess while in a state of mortal sin results in a new mortal sin. For as the Catechism expresses it, sacrilege is a grave sin, especially when committed against the Eucharist, for in this sacrament the true body of Christ is made substantially present for us. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops elaborates on this topic when they say, "To receive the body and blood of Christ while in a state of mortal sin represents a contradiction. The person who, by his or her own action, has broken communion with Christ and His Church, but receives the Blessed Sacrament, acts incoherently, both claiming and rejecting communion at the same time. Thus anyone in a state of mortal sin must first confess that sin, or they will incur an additional mortal sin."